Hello, my name's Elisa Gray, and I'm going to be doing a talk for you now. I shall wait to see if everybody can see me and hear me okay. So if anybody's watching, if you could give me a thumbs up, just to let me know. Oh, hello, Anne. Yeah, can you see me and hear me all right, Anne? Yeah. Hello, Julie. Awesome, right. I'll assume there's no problems then. So tonight's talk is going to be a little bit different, really, from what I normally do, because I normally talk about women a lot in witchcraft, and tonight's talk is actually about men. It's a universal truth, isn't it, that witches are women? You know, the stereotype that exists. I dare say it's changing. You know, the male witch is on the rise. I'm sure in some places it's kind of even. But when I was younger, it was women. It was always women. Nobody male ever said, you know, anything at all about witchcraft. And it was always assumed that witches were women. But that is not the case. And it never has been. So, first of all, we're going to just go right back in time to the Malleus Maleficarum. That horrible book that backed up the Pope when he decided that witchcraft should be a crime of heresy. And he wrote it. Henry Kramer wrote that book to make witches, their crime being heresy. And 33 pages of the Malleus Maleficarum were dedicated to men. So bearing in mind this is quite a thick book, 33 pages were for guys. And their crimes were things like shooting arrows at the Holy Cross. You know, that was deemed as witchery. Spitting on the Holy Cross. When you think about what a woman was accused of, murder, maim, you know, all these horrible crimes that she was accused of with witchcraft, a man was accused of shooting the Holy Cross. But he was still in there. He was still investigated. Now, when we think back to ancient Mesopotamia, Persia, Greece, it was men who used magic. It was the Greek men who carried the curse tablets. It was the men who put the colosseum, the little Greek puppets around their house to protect their land. It was very much men who were in control of magic. And this started to split off with men sort of ruling the high magic and women were the witches, were the dark magic users. But when we look at the statistics from the witch trials, it's quite interesting. In Iceland, 92% of those killed were men. Now, this is a real anomaly. I mean, across most of the known world, it was women who were killed in the witch trials. But Iceland, 92% men. When you think about Iceland, it's got a lot of Viking influence. You know, the Vikings went to Iceland. A lot of pagan, Nordic pagan kind of influence, which lingered. And it was very high in Icelandic accusations. Normandy, 73% was men. Estonia, 60% were men. And they're the three that really stand out. And in Normandy, it was the shepherd who was targeted. Like in Britain, it was the crone, the old hag with a wart on her nose, or, you know, the old evil witch. It was the shepherd in Normandy, which is very, very unusual. I can't think why it would be. Maybe it's because he was on his own a lot, you know, out on the land with the sheep, and people didn't really know him and didn't trust him. Also, any outsiders or foreigners, I'm part Romany, and Romany gypsies, wherever they went, they were accused of witchcraft. They were said to curse people, the evil eye, and all this sort of thing. So gypsy men were often targeted for witchcraft, as well as gypsy women. So there's a great case here I'm going to tell you about from Iceland. And this was a father and son, both named John Johnson. And it's got a little flick above the J, so I'm sure it was Jon Johnson. And this is in 1655. And it was known as the Kirkable Witch Trials. And Reverend John Magnuson, he began waking up in the night to the sensation of cats and mice crawling over his feet. and of a dog with red-hot claws pinning his body to the bed. And he had no doubt that he was bewitched, no doubt at all. So he certainly knew who'd done this. When his night terrors began, he accused the older Jon Janssen, and he was drunk when he accused him, and he admitted he'd sent a spirit to taunt the Reverend. So that was it. You know, 'cause he was a bit drunk, and he's like, yeah, I sent a spirit. And then the son was accused of helping his father, and despite it stopping, you know, the Reverend's night terror stopped. But even so, he burned them on April the 20th, 1656, both together in the town centre. So that's just like a woman. That's basically exactly the same reasons as a woman would be accused. Nothing any different, but it was men in Iceland. Now, when you start looking at this across the world, in different places, and as time comes further on, there starts to be reasons why men are accused of witchcraft. Women, there didn't need to be a reason. You could just be in the way and they would accuse you of witchcraft. But with a man, there started to become lots of reasons. And one of the most famous cases, and you've got to get the book, you must do, because it's a real ride, the Ludong Possessions. And I've mentioned this chap before, Urban Grandier, who was a French Catholic priest. And he kept the wall of Ludon up. The king had written him a letter saying that he wouldn't bring the wall down. And even after the king had died, he'd still got this letter. And it was at the point where they wanted to take all the city walls down and unify France. But Grandier wouldn't let them. He said, no, I've got this letter and you're not taking the wall down. We're independent. Right at that moment, when he was becoming a bit of a political problem, Sister Jeanne of the Angels, who was a deformed, humpback nun, who was only a nun because she was unmarriable, and her parents had shoved her into the convent, she saw Grandier walking past the convent and she fell in love with him. And she started having sexual fantasies about him. And of course the other nuns in the convent started to cotton on because weird things were going on with Sister Jeanne that shouldn't be. So she basically got investigated by the men, the high up in the clergy, finding out what was going on with this crazy nun. And she accused Grandier of sending out his spirit to make love to her, and that he'd brought other demons with him to make love to her sisters in the nunnery. Normally, you know, this would have been laughed at. It would have been laughed out of, you know, nothing would have happened. But because they wanted rid of him, this was a great moment for them to go, right, we can use this. So they went off to the convent in Ludon and basically said to the nuns, you will scream, you will act crazy, you'll do absolutely lunatic things, or we'll kill you. So the nuns started ripping off the clothes, barking like dogs, crawling on all fours, performing lewd sexual acts in front of people who wanted to go and watch. You know, it became a bit of a thing. You know, people went to the convent to see them, these possessed nuns. And Grandier was dragged in and accused of being a Satanist, basically, of making a pact with the devil, of performing witchery on these nuns. They even wrote up a pact with the devil and forged his signature and said, you signed this, you know, you are in league with the devil. He's like, no, I'm not. You know, this is absolute rubbish. And he actually met Sister Jeanne and he looked her in the eyes and said, why? You know, why are you doing this to me? And she just screamed, devil, at him. So they used this as a wonderful opportunity to drag him out, to torture him. They crushed his legs so badly that bone marrow trickled down the outside of his legs. And then they dragged him off to the fire, and he was supposed to get strangled before he was burned because he was a priest. But the priest who was supposed to be strangling him spat in his face and threw the rope in the fire and let him burn to death, alive, you know, screaming. And then they did, you know, when they went back to the convent, all the people stopped going. It stopped being, like, you know, a show, a fun show. And Sister Jeanne said, so what am I going to do now? You know, it's going to be boring now. It's an absolutely unbelievable case. The Ludong Possessions. There's a book, read it. It's fantastic. But poor old Grandier. Completely innocent, but a political scapegoat. There's another chap called Gilles de Rais. And he's quite an interesting fella. He was accused. He was actually Joan of Arc. He was one of her soldiers. He was very high up. He was a lord from Brittany. And he got in the way politically. They wanted rid of him. And so they accused him of being a child murderer. And some of the things that they accused him of were so crazy that I'm not going to talk about them, because they were very, very severe things that he was accused of with children and worshipping the devil. And again, he couldn't prove his innocence, and he was burned. So that's two cases of men who got in the way in some sort of political situation, and witchcraft was used as a convenient way to get rid of them. Now, of course, we have men who persecuted men. And one of these men was Matthew Hopkins. When witchcraft started to become less believed in, obviously we'd had King James on the throne, who wrote demonology, who was very big on witchcraft. Then we got King Charles I, who was far more scientifically minded, and he wanted more proof. Somebody was accused of witchcraft and, they showed him a wart or something. He was like, give me proof that this is a witch, or go away. This is ridiculous. And basically the witch trials started to end. But Matthew Hopkins was having none of that. He saw a way of making money. He was very young. He died at 28, even though he's always depicted as a very old man when you see him in films or anything. But basically, he just decided, I'm going to be a witch finder. And he gave himself that title. And he was around the East Anglia area of the country. And he just went off to different villages and saying, right, I'm here. I'm looking for witches. Where's the witches? And he got £1 for everybody who was proven to be a witch. So he was onto a really good thing. He also got some of the land from people. So, young lad, money spinning idea, a bit of an entrepreneur for his day. And he killed the local reverend. Reverend Lowe was 80. But nobody liked him. He was very stern, very stern priest who kept his flock in line. Oh no, we're not having any of that. Keeping the morals high. And people, no, we don't like him, don't like Reverend Lowe. So when Matthew Hopkins turned up in that particular village, they said, Reverend Lowe's a witch, he's in league with the devil, because they wanted to get rid of him. So of course, Matthew Hopkins, he doesn't care how old he is, he's not bothered, turned up and dragged Reverend Lowe out, tied a rope round him, threw him in the river, pulled him out, threw him back in, pulled him out, threw him back in, swimming him, to see if he was going to float or whatever. And then he wouldn't let him sleep. So they locked him up in a cell with two burly men who kept picking him up off his chair and walking him round the cell whenever it looked like he was going to fall asleep. And in the end, the poor old boy confessed. He confessed to witchery, but he wouldn't confess to being in league with the devil. Whatever, they hung him. So again, a man who was got rid of because he was in the way, wasn't liked, he was doing something that didn't fit, even though he was a priest. And this is what's different about women and men. Men could be really high up and they could still be, proven of witchcraft and killed. Whereas women tended to be there weren't any high up women at the time, in that day. They were all, sort of peasants and wives and mothers, and, there weren't any really power women sort of walking around with jobs at the time. So it was a completely different thing. Men in power seemed to attract the accusations of witchcraft if they got in the way. So, words. This is an interesting one. What's all this about warlock? There's still people out there who think that warlock means male witch. Well, it doesn't. It means oath breaker. Okay, so looking at words and when they came in, obviously we've talked about the word witch, which was born in 890 when Alfred the Great wrote it in the Book of the Law. and he spelled it in two different ways for man and woman. And the feminine form was Wick, WICCE, and the masculine form was Wicca. I mean, obviously those were, Wicca means something, it's a religion. People think Wicca religion, but originally that meant male. It was the male form of witch, but it was still witch. Witch is male or female. So the word warlock, it came in around about, I think it was about 1,000, the year 1000 AD, and it meant oathbreaker and deceiver. But one man was accused of witchcraft, and they called him a warlock because he had broken his oath to God. So it still means oathbreaker, but because he's broken his oath to God, it stuck. It kind of got attached to the male witch being hung. But it doesn't mean witch at all. Now, wizard came in 1550, and it originated from the Middle English word wise, W-Y-S, meaning wise. So this is a loaded word, wizard. And it's a word that gives the impression, that the wizard is wise, very wise and male. You never hear a woman called a wizard. It's always a man. And wise, he's wise. He knows his thing, it's sort of removing it from witchcraft. So, then we've got thaumaturge. Word that's dropped out of the language completely, but thaumaturge means miracle worker. And all thaumaturges were men. There were no women. So the miracle worker, the creator of wonders, was a man, because he could handle that, incredible magic, never associated with women at all. So yes, there's some really interesting sort of stereotypes that are attached to the words. Magician, mage, magician. Another one, man. You don't hear a woman called a magician. Nobody goes, oh, I'm a magician. We always say I'm a witch. And what we're actually saying is, I am a woman who uses magic for nothing but harm. Because that's what witch means. When a man says, I'm a wizard, he's saying, I'm really wise and I know my stuff. And if a man says, I'm a warlock, he's saying, I'm an oathbreaker. So the words, that really do bring these, still there. Still in the Oxford Dictionary, it's still very much there. So, obviously, Gerald Gardner, it was both men and women. When you think of esoterica, high magic, alchemy, the Kabbalah, levitation, all this crazy stuff that Aleister Crowley was into, and we'll talk about him in a minute. This was very much a man thing. Women weren't allowed for a start. It was only later on that they started to let women in. But Gerald Gardner, he wanted both. He was always very open with both sexes, men and women coming in, and he didn't sort of discriminate. So with witchcraft being part, as part of Wiccan, this is when in the sort of 60s and 70s, when the earth religions and all that kind of thing made a big comeback, men began to reuse the word witch, the title witch, and sort of moved away from warlock. And now, obviously, in the modern world, there's so many men sort of standing up and saying, yeah, I'm a witch, and reclaiming the word witch, which, yeah, absolutely, and rejecting the word warlock because they don't perceive themselves to be an oath breaker. That's not the word for them. So that's great. So, getting back into important men who were accused of witchery, Pope Sylvester II was said to have made a pact with a female demon called Meridiana, and she aided him in his endeavours. And several popes were accused of witchcraft and working with demons. Some got away with it, some didn't. You know, some were like, oh yes, it's part of, I'm a priest, so I can handle working with dark magic. It's not a problem because I'm a man of God. And they got away with it. Others, again, you know, the scapegoat situation. After the Spanish Inquisition, you know, they picked a couple of popes to nobble because they started to look for a scapegoat. Who can we blame for this mass murder? Let's get rid of these two. You know, they said do it. And they accused him of witchcraft. And it was a great way. It was the perfect way to get rid of somebody, whether they were a man or a woman. So, and obviously with the Pope Sylvester, Cardinal Benno, who was a supporter of the anti-popes and was biased against the Pope, he wrote that Sylvester was regularly waited on by demons and that by their help he had obtained the papal crown. So the demons had helped him become Pope. And he also wrote that the devil to whom Sylvester had sold his soul had faithfully promised that he should live until he had celebrated High Mass at Jerusalem. And obviously Benno was trying to, he was trying to get rid of him. Oh yeah, he's in with the demons, but Sylvester was fine, nobody bothered him, so he got away with it. So it seems that men have been linked with magic just as much as women throughout history. But what is implied through these historical examples is that men used magic to further their career and to gain power and knowledge. At one time they would go off to Arabia. They would go on a pilgrimage to Arabia to learn these different sort of glyphs and symbols and magical elements for knowledge and power. Whereas women, we're just supposed to know it somehow. Nowhere in history have we got a woman going and reading a book and learning magic. It's innate. As far as men are concerned, as far as the powers that be were concerned, witchcraft was innate within a woman. With the twisted, the bent rib, all this stuff that I've talked about before, it comes naturally. Dark magic comes naturally to us. Whereas a man, he had to go and learn it. He had to go off and on a trek and get the book and read it. Obviously, again, it was men, mainly men, not all men, but the high up, the more well-to-do could read. What woman could read in 1600, 1500? Well, there weren't very many, I shouldn't think, if any. So, yes, if you think about Faust, the Christopher Marlowe play Faust. Faust is the top of his field, he's all-knowing, he knows everything. And he starts learning magic because that's all that's left to learn. And he becomes the top of that, and he gets so good at it. And he forgets he's got to pay back at the end of his deal with the devil. He's got to give his soul to the devil. And he says, I'll burn my books. Blaming the books for the knowledge that he's got. Again, attached to the man, the books, in the big alchemical room with the jars and bottles and steaming liquids. And the woman, no. She was just in a shack somewhere, trying to make her husband his dinner, and was accused because, she's a woman. With the man, there was a reason. So, yes, women just cause havoc, whereas men have to go off and learn how to cause havoc. So, yeah, the Oxford Dictionary definition of a witch, a woman who is believed to have magic powers, especially to do evil things. In stories, she usually wears a black pointed hat and flies on a broomstick. And I think that's why. That's in everybody. That's from a child, the Wizard of Oz. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too. It's a woman. It's a woman. A witch is a woman, but no, there were indeed men accused of witchcraft in Iceland for very similar reasons as women. Elsewhere, political scapegoats, dislike priests, popes who put the foot in the wrong place, and somebody needs a scapegoat to get rid of them and pass the book onto them. And it's really fascinating to look at the differences and the different accusations and by whom. The high up people accusing men, whereas it was very much the common person accusing women. The yes, all hail, the upcoming male witch. It's about time, that we, in this, sort of generation now, that men are reclaiming the word witch and are sort of loud and proud about being witches, and sort of losing these stereotypes of warlock and wizard. And it tickles me because they've done the word wizardess now, haven't they? It's the modern, through Harry Potter, there's the word wizardess, which has existed for 5 minutes, to try and even out the wise man wizard, and now there's a wizardess, it's just, oh dear, it's not going to work, really. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, these words are becoming archaic, we don't hear thaumaturge anymore. Wizard, we think about Lord of the Rings and Gandalf, that's it, Witch is here to stay, no matter its textbook meaning, of some, woman to do harm. At the end of the day, it's all we've got. It's the only word we've got, that's actually ours, that we can reclaim, both male and female, and sort of stand up and go, yeah, take that, I'm a witch. What are you going to do about it? So, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that you found that interesting. I would certainly get the Ludong Possessions book. There's some unbelievable stuff in there that the nuns did. It's just crazy. And also, obviously, just sort of research a few of the popes, who used dark magic, who were, making golems and summoning demons and using Enochian to summon demons. And so there's loads of them, who were doing it, who never got punished. It's just this political scapegoat thing. And so check out Grandier, check out Gilles de Rais, and Pope Sylvester. And it's very, 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 very interesting. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you again with another talk in the future. Thank you.